Let me ask you something honest. If you could go back 3 years ago and actually do everything you said you were going to do, where would your life be right now? Think about that for a second, because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Most people already know exactly what they need to do. They know they should wake up earlier. They know they should exercise. They know they should stop scrolling and start building. They know, but they don't do it. And that gap, that painful, frustrating space between knowing and doing, that is what today is about. Stay with me until the end, because Tracy is about to hand you a key that most people spend their entire lives looking for and never find. Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm really glad you found this. And if you've been here before, you already know what we do. We take the most powerful books in the world and we break them down in a way that actually sticks. Not in a way that makes you feel like you're reading a textbook, but in a way that feels like a conversation between two people who are genuinely trying to figure life out. So grab a cup of something warm, find a comfortable spot, and let's talk about a book that I genuinely believe has the power to change the direction of your life. The book is called The Power of Self-Discipline by Tracy. And if that title already feels like something that requires effort just to read, I hear you. But trust me, by the time we're done here today, the word discipline is going to feel completely different to you. Oh, and if this kind of content speaks to you, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps more people find this. Now, let's get into it. Imagine you're sitting across from two people. Person A wakes up every morning at 5 a.m. They exercise before the sun comes up. They eat well. They work on their goals. They read. They save money. They show up, even when they don't feel like it. Person B hits snooze 4 times. They'll start the diet on Monday. They've been meaning to read that book for 6 months. They're waiting to feel motivated. They're waiting for the right moment. Now here's what most of us assume when we picture these two people. We assume person A was just born different, that they have some special kind of willpower that person B simply doesn't have, that it's a personality thing, a talent thing, something you either have or you don't. And that belief, that quiet, comfortable little lie, is exactly what keeps millions of people stuck. Tracy opens this book by attacking that belief head-on. He says something that sounds simple, but hits incredibly hard when you really sit with it. Self-discipline is a skill, not a gift, not a personality trait, not something reserved for the naturally strong. It is a learnable, buildable, practicable skill, just like playing an instrument or learning a language. Let that land for a moment, because if discipline is a skill, then every single excuse we've ever made starts to fall apart. You didn't fail because you're weak. You failed because you never learned the skill. And that is actually good news, because skills can be learned. Tracy talks about something he calls the top 5%. He says if you study the most successful people in any field, business, athletics, the arts, science, you'll find that what separates the top 5% from everyone else isn't raw talent. It isn't luck. It isn't even intelligence. It's consistency. The ability to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether they feel like it or not. And here's what's interesting. Most of those people will tell you they don't always feel motivated. They don't always wake up energized and excited. They feel tired. They feel doubtful. They feel the pull of comfort just like everyone else. The difference is, they do it anyway. And the more they do it anyway, the easier it gets. The more natural it feels. Until eventually, discipline doesn't feel like fighting yourself anymore. It feels like becoming yourself. But wait, here's where it gets really interesting. Because it's not just about doing hard things. It's about understanding why your brain is working against you in the first place. The enemy inside your own mind. Here's something that might surprise you. Your brain is not designed to help you succeed. It's designed to keep you alive. And in the wild, that meant conserving energy, avoiding pain, and chasing immediate pleasure. Your brain has been running that same operating system for about 200,000 years. So, when you decide that tomorrow you're going to start waking up early, eating better, and working harder, your brain looks at that plan and basically says, "No, thank you. That sounds exhausting and uncomfortable, and I'd rather not." This is what Brian Tracy calls the path of least resistance. And he's very honest about it. The path of least resistance is the default setting for every human being on the planet. Without discipline, we naturally drift toward comfort. We drift toward easy. We drift toward now. And the problem with living for now is that 5 years from now, nothing changes. 10 years from now, you're still in the same place, wondering what happened. This is where most people stay stuck their entire lives, not because they're bad people or lazy people, but because they never learn to override that default setting. But here's what Brian Tracy wants you to understand deeply. Every time you choose the hard thing over the easy thing, you are literally rewiring your brain. You are building new pathways. You are changing your default. Think about the first time you ever drove a car. It was terrifying, wasn't it? You had to consciously think about every single thing: the mirrors, the pedals, the speed, the lane. It took so much mental effort that it was exhausting. But what about now? Now you probably drive for 20 minutes and barely remember half of it. It became automatic. Discipline works the exact same way. The first week of waking up at 6 a.m. feels like war. The first month of exercising feels brutal. But give it enough time, give it enough repetitions, and what once felt impossible becomes your new normal. And your new normal becomes your new minimum. Right now, you might be thinking, "Okay, but I've tried this before. I set the alarm, I made the plan. I lasted a week, maybe 2. And then life happened, and I fell back into my old habits." I hear that, I really do. And Brian Tracy addresses this directly. He says, most people fail not because they lack motivation, but because they're trying to change too many things at once. Here's a scene I want you to picture. Someone decides they're going to completely transform their life starting Monday. They're going to wake up at 5, go to the gym, meal prep for the week, journal every morning, read 30 minutes a night, stop drinking coffee, start meditating, call their parents more, and finally, work on that business idea. Day 1 is incredible. They feel unstoppable. Day 3, they miss the gym. Then they feel like a failure. Then they think, well, if I'm already failing at the gym, I might as well sleep in. And if I'm sleeping in, the whole morning routine is ruined. And if the morning routine is ruined, and just like that, it all collapses, like a house of cards in a gentle breeze. Brian Tracy is very clear about this. He says, the secret to building lasting self-discipline is not to tackle everything at once. It's to pick one keystone habit, one central behavior, and anchor your entire discipline practice to that one thing. He calls these keystone habits because, just like a keystone in an arch, when you get that one habit right, everything else starts to hold up around it. For most people, that keystone habit is the morning. What you do in the first hour of your day sets the tone for everything that follows. If you win the morning, you tend to win the day. So, starting today, if you want to do one practical thing with this information, don't try to change everything. Pick one thing, just one. Something small enough that you can't say no, but meaningful enough that it actually matters. Maybe it's making your bed. Maybe it's drinking water before coffee. Maybe it's sitting quietly for 5 minutes before reaching for your phone. One thing, done consistently, is the beginning of everything. Now here's the part nobody talks about. The part that happens after you've built the habit, after things are going well. Because this is where a very sneaky trap appears.
The discipline paradox. Brian Tracy talks about something that seems counterintuitive at first. He says that the more successful you become, the more dangerous comfort gets. Think about it. When you have nothing, discipline is easy to find. You're hungry, you're motivated, you're trying to climb. But once you reach a certain level, once the pressure is off a little, once things are good enough, that's when discipline quietly starts to fade.
This is the discipline paradox. Most people lose their edge, not when things are hard, but when things are comfortable. He tells a story about the Roman Empire, how for centuries, Rome was built by warriors and thinkers who were hungry, disciplined, and driven. They trained daily, they sacrificed, they built something extraordinary. But then came the wealth, the feasts, the entertainment, the comfort. And slowly, so slowly that nobody even noticed at first, the discipline dissolved, the hunger faded, and eventually, what had taken centuries to build began to crumble. You don't have to be building an empire to feel this. Maybe you felt it yourself. You worked so hard to get that job, that relationship, that health milestone, and then you got it. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you stopped doing the things that got you there. Brian Tracy's message here is simple but sobering. Success requires discipline, not just to achieve, but to maintain. The habits that bring you to the top are the same habits that keep you there. The moment you think you've arrived and you can ease up is often the moment the slow drift begins. So how do you stay disciplined even when you're comfortable? You set a higher standard. Not to be a perfectionist, not to be miserable, but because humans were built to grow. When we stop growing, we don't stay the same. We begin to shrink. And deep down, you already know that. By the way, if you're finding this valuable and you haven't already, this be a good moment to hit subscribe. We do this every week, and I'd love for you to be here for it. Now, let's keep going, because what Brian Tracy shares next is something I think about almost every day. The master key, long-term thinking. Here's a question for you. If I offered you $100 right now, or $1,000 in 30 days, which would you choose? Most people logically say the 1,000. But if I changed it to $100 right now versus $1,000 in 5 years, suddenly, for a lot of people, the answer changes. Why? Because the further away a reward is, the less real it feels, the less it motivates us, and the more we tend to trade the big future thing for the small present thing. Brian Tracy says this is one of the most important things to understand about self-discipline. He calls it the long-term perspective. He says every study on success, on financial achievement, on health, on relationships, points to the same finding. The people who do best in life are the people who are willing to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term gain. Not once, not occasionally, but as a consistent way of living. The student who studies when others party. The entrepreneur who saves when others spend. The athlete who trains when others rest. None of them are doing it because it's easy. They're doing it because they can see the future version of themselves, and they refuse to let that version down. This is what Brian Tracy calls living from the future backwards. Most people live from the present forward. They make decisions based on how they feel right now. But the most disciplined people, the most successful people, they start with the vision of where they want to be. And then they ask themselves, what would the person who achieves that goal do today? And then they do that. It sounds simple, and it is. But simple is not the same as easy. You may have heard of the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment. Researchers sat young children in a room with one marshmallow on a table in front of them. They told each child, you can eat this marshmallow right now, or you can wait 15 minutes and we'll give you 2 marshmallows. Then they left the room. Some kids ate it immediately. Some lasted a few minutes. Some waited the full 15 minutes and got their second marshmallow. What's remarkable is what happened to those kids decades later. The ones who waited consistently showed higher grades, healthier relationships, better careers, and greater life satisfaction than those who didn't. Not because waiting for a marshmallow magically made them better people, but because the ability to delay gratification, the ability to say not now, something better is coming, was a skill that ran through every area of their lives.
Brian Tracy's point is this: self-discipline and the ability to delay gratification are almost the same thing. And like we said at the very beginning, it's a skill. It can be learned, it can be strengthened, and you can start today. Actually, I want to pause here for a second and ask you something. What's the one area of your life where you know deep down that a little more discipline
would change everything. It might be your health, your finances, a relationship, your career, a creative project you've been putting off for years. Whatever it is, hold that in your mind, because what we're about to talk about is going to speak directly to it. Here's something Brian Tracy says that stopped me completely when I first read it. He says, the first and greatest act of self-discipline is not consistency, it's not routine, it's not waking up early or working hard. It's the courage to begin. Because most people never fail at discipline, they fail at starting. Think about how many ideas have lived and died in your mind because you never took the first step. How many businesses that never got a business plan? How many books that never got a first chapter? How many relationships that could have been repaired if someone had just made the first call? Starting is hard because starting means risking. It means putting yourself in the game. It means admitting you want something and that you might not get it. And for a lot of us, the fear of failure is so strong that we'd rather stay in comfortable limbo than risk the pain of trying and falling short. But Brian Tracy says something that cuts right through that fear. He says, action and momentum are the antidote to fear. Not thinking about it, not planning perfectly, not waiting until you feel ready. Action. Because here's the truth nobody tells you when you're stuck in the planning stage. You will never feel completely ready. Ready is a feeling that comes after you start, not before. The person who feels confident and prepared when they begin something hard is the exception, not the rule. Most of the greatest achievements in human history were started by people who were afraid, uncertain, underprepared, and started anyway. That is what courage actually looks like. It's not the absence of fear. It's taking the step while the fear is still there. And here is the beautiful thing about that first step. It almost always creates the second step, and the second step creates the third. And before you know it, you have momentum. And momentum makes everything easier. So whatever it is that you've been waiting to begin, Brian Tracy's message is simple and direct. Start ugly, start scared, start small if you have to, but start. And this is where everything changes. Because once you understand how to begin, you need to understand how to keep going when it gets hard. Because it will get hard. And what happens in those hard moments determines everything. Let me describe a moment you've probably lived through. You're 2 or 3 weeks into a new habit. Things are going well. You're proud of yourself. You're building something. And then one morning, something happens. Maybe you slept badly. Maybe something went wrong at work. Maybe you just feel exhausted and empty and completely unmotivated. And in that moment, your old self whispers, just this once. You deserve a break. You've been doing so well. One missed day won't hurt. And that voice is not lying to you. One missed day really won't ruin everything. But Brian Tracy says the danger is not the missed day. The danger is the story you tell yourself about the missed day. Because the moment you say it's okay to skip, you are quietly renegotiating your agreement with yourself. And the next time it gets hard, that moment comes back to you. And skipping becomes a little easier. He talks about a concept called the discipline of difficult moments. And it's one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. He says, the value of any commitment is tested not when it's easy, but when it's hard. Anyone can be disciplined on a good day. When you slept well, you feel energized, the sun is shining, and everything is going smoothly. Discipline is almost effortless. But the real test, the moment that actually builds character, is the hard morning, the painful day, the moment when everything inside you is saying stop, and you choose to keep going anyway. Those moments don't just keep the habit alive, they forge something in you. They build a kind of inner confidence that no one can take away. Brian Tracy calls this the iron will. Not something dramatic or superhuman, just the quiet, steady, unshakable knowledge that you can be trusted, that you will do what you say you'll do. And when you know that about yourself, everything in your life begins to change.
Discipline and identity. This is, I think, the deepest idea in the entire book. Brian Tracy says that self-discipline is not just a strategy.
It's not just a tool for achieving goals. It is the foundation of your identity. Here's what he means. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you are. When you follow through on a commitment, you are casting a vote for the version of yourself who keeps their word. When you break a promise to yourself, you are casting a vote for the version of yourself who doesn't. And over time, those votes accumulate. This is why so many people struggle with self-confidence, even when they look successful from the outside. Because deep down, they know they haven't kept their promises to themselves. They know they said they'd wake up earlier, and they didn't. They said they'd save money, and they didn't. They said they'd finish the project, and they didn't. And every single broken promise quietly erodes the trust you have in yourself. But here's the flip side of that. Every kept promise builds it back up. Not overnight, not in one grand gesture, but slowly, day by day, one small act of follow-through at a time, you begin to build a new identity. The identity of someone who does what they say, someone who shows up, someone who can be trusted. And once that identity takes root, discipline stops being a struggle. Because now, you're not fighting your habits, you're being who you are. Brian Tracy says it beautifully. Every act of self-discipline strengthens every other discipline in your life. When you master one area, it spills over into others. The person who is physically disciplined tends to be mentally disciplined. The person who is financially disciplined tends to be emotionally disciplined. Discipline is not a cage. It is freedom, real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you feel like in any given moment, but the freedom to build the life you actually want, on your terms, according to your values. Do you remember the question I asked at the very beginning? If you could go back 3 years and actually do everything you said you were going to do, where would your life be right now? I want to ask you a different version of that question now. 3 years from today, if you start making the small, consistent, disciplined choices that you know you need to make, who could you be? Not who you wish you were, who you could actually become if you simply honored your own commitments. Because here's what Brian Tracy leaves us with at the very end of this book. Your life is the sum of your choices. Not the big, dramatic ones, not the once-in-a-lifetime decisions, the small, daily ones. The tiny moments when you chose the hard thing or the easy thing, when you followed through or let yourself off the hook, when you showed up or walked away. Those moments, accumulated over months and years, become your life. And the beautiful thing, the thing I hope you take from today, is that this is not a sentence. It's an invitation. Every single morning when you open your eyes, you get a fresh opportunity to cast a new vote, to build a new version of yourself, to keep one promise, just one. Start there. Not with a complete life overhaul, not with a perfect system, not with motivation that you may or may not feel tomorrow morning, with one small act of discipline. Do the hard thing first, before the noise starts, before the excuses build, before the day takes over. Because discipline is not about being perfect. It's not about never failing. It's about being the kind of person who gets back up, every time, without drama, without excuses, without needing the world to be perfect first. Brian Tracy spent decades studying the most successful people on earth. And this is what he found at the center of every single one of them. Not genius, not talent, not luck. A quiet, steady, unbreakable commitment to doing what needed to be done. And that is available to every single one of us, including you, especially you. So the next time the alarm goes off, the next time you feel the pull of comfort, the next time the voice says just this once, I want you to remember this moment, this feeling right now. And I want you to choose the harder thing. Not because it's easy, because you're building something that matters. And because 3 years from now, the version of you that kept going will look back on this exact moment and be so glad that you did.